Does Buddhism deny reality? Addressing misconceptions about emptiness and Maya. Part 1. The question of reality. Have you ever paused, truly stopped, to consider what's genuinely real? Not in an abstract, philosophical way, but in a deeply personal one. Think about a rainbow. It appears before you, a vibrant, beautiful arc of color across the sky. You can see it, you can photograph it, but can you actually touch it? Can you grasp it and hold it in your hand? Is it physically there in the same way a tree, a rock, or even a cloud is? Or consider a dream, so vivid, so emotional, perhaps even terrifying while it's happening. The characters feel real, the situations feel urgent, but upon waking, it all vanishes like mist. Where did it go? Was it ever really there? These aren't just idle musings. These kinds of experiences, these fundamental questions about the nature of our experience, lie at the very core of Buddhist philosophy. There's a common idea, almost a cliché, floating around that Buddhism dismisses reality altogether, that it claims everything is simply an illusion, a mirage. This isn't the full picture. It's a misunderstanding, a simplification of a much more nuanced and, frankly, more useful perspective. It is an incomplete and easily misinterpreted reading of the teachings. Buddhism doesn't say the world around you, the screen you're reading, the chair you're sitting on, the sounds you hear, isn't real in the sense that it's non-existent. Instead, it encourages a different way of seeing that reality, a shift in perspective. It's about recognizing that things are in constant flux, that everything is interconnected in ways we often overlook, and that ultimately, things lack a permanent, independent self. This lacking is a crucial concept, often referred to as emptiness. But it's not a void, not a nihilistic nothingness. It's far more subtle and far more interesting than that. We're going to touch upon two key Buddhist ideas that will help us explore this further. Śūnyatā, often translated, somewhat imperfectly, as emptiness, and Maya, often translated, again imperfectly, as illusion. We won't get bogged down in complex definitions right now. The goal at this stage is to spark curiosity, to plant a seed of inquiry, not to overwhelm with jargon. Think of these terms as signposts, pointing towards a deeper understanding. The Buddha, the historical figure who founded this tradition, always emphasized a middle way. He didn't assert that the world is entirely real, in the sense of being fixed and unchanging, nor did he say it's entirely unreal, a complete fabrication. His teachings point to something in between, a perspective that avoids extremes, a way of seeing that acknowledges the complexities of existence. He taught that there were two extremes to be avoided. One is indulgence on sensual pleasures, while the other one is based on mortification of self. The middle way is a way of life that avoids both of these extremes. The Buddha saw an ancient path, an ancient road that was traveled by enlightened ones. The middle way is a koan, where there is neither going forward nor going backward, nor standing still. Think of it like this. You're not being asked to deny your experiences, your perceptions, your feelings. You're being invited to examine them with greater care, with a more discerning eye. By doing so, it's possible to discover a more peaceful, joyful, and grounded way of being in the world. It's a different perspective, perhaps, but a profoundly useful, practical one, a way of engaging with life that reduces suffering and increases understanding. It is an ongoing and dynamic effort to apply the Buddha's wisdom to the questions, the challenges, and the everyday realities of life. Part 2. Is anything real? What Buddhism really says. To truly grasp this different perspective on reality, we have to start by questioning some of our most fundamental assumptions. It's a process of gently, but persistently, turning our usual way of thinking on its head. It's not about rejecting the world, but about seeing it with fresh eyes. Let's start with a seemingly simple question. Who are you? Really? Are you a fixed, separate, unchanging entity? Think about it for a moment. Your body is constantly changing. Cells are dying and being reborn. The food you ate yesterday is becoming part of you, while waste is being eliminated. Even on a scientific level, we know we're made of constantly shifting particles, a whirlwind of activity. Now consider your feelings. Are they constant? Or do they shift and change like the weather? Happiness, sadness, anger, contentment, all arising and passing away. What about your thoughts? A constant stream of ideas, memories, plans, judgments, wherein all of this constant flux is the permanent, unchanging you. This is the exploration of Anatta, often translated as no self or not self. It's not saying you don't exist. It's saying that the you cling to, the solid, separate self, is an illusion. This might sound unsettling, but it's actually incredibly liberating. It's like realizing you're not a statue, fixed and immobile, but a dancer, fluid and free. And this brings us to Śūnyatā, emptiness. Think of the space a dancer needs to move. Without that space, the dance couldn't happen. That space isn't nothing. It's the potential for all movement, all expression. Śūnyatā is similar. It's not a void, but the open, dynamic ground from which everything arises. Everything, according to Buddhist teachings, arises from causes and conditions. Nothing exists independently, in isolation. A flower blooms because of sunlight, water, soil, and the seed. Remove any of those conditions, and the flower wouldn't exist. This is called dependent origination. It's a profound insight into the interconnectedness of all things. The late Vietnamese Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, beautifully expressed this interconnectedness as interbeing. He pointed out that your breath contains atoms that were once part of distant stars, that the rain falling outside your window contains elements that were once part of the ocean. Everything is constantly interpenetrating everything else. There are no truly separate, isolated entities. When we begin to grasp this, when we start to see through the illusion of separateness, something remarkable happens. We begin to release our attachments, not in a cold, detached way, but with a sense of openness and freedom. We realize that clinging to things that are constantly changing is a recipe for suffering. It's like being a river. A river is always flowing, always changing. If you try to hold on to a particular drop of water, you'll fail. But if you let the river flow, you can experience its beauty and its power. This isn't apathy or indifference. It's about living fully in the present moment, without clinging to what inevitably passes. The Buddha once said, "When you realize how perfect everything is, you will tilt your head back and laugh at the sky." This isn't about some abstract perfection. It's about seeing the interconnectedness, the impermanence, the emptiness of all things, and finding joy in that understanding. For one day, try this. Observe everything around you. a tree, a car, a person, and ask yourself, what makes this up? What conditions allow it to exist? Does it truly exist independently, or is it part of a larger, interconnected web? Just observe, without judgment. It's a simple practice, but it can begin to shift your perspective in profound ways. Part 3. Are you living in a dream? How Buddhism explains Maya. Having explored the fluidity of self and the interconnectedness of all things, let's turn to another challenging question. How much of what you perceive is shaped by your own mind? Are you experiencing reality directly, or is there a layer, a filter, between you and the raw world? This is where the concept of Maya, often translated as illusion, comes into play. It's not about saying the external world is unreal like a hallucination. It's about recognizing that our minds don't simply passively receive information. Our minds actively construct our experience. Think of the mind as a projector, not just a screen. It's not merely reflecting reality. It's shaping it, coloring it, interpreting it, based on our past experiences, our beliefs, our conditioning. Consider this. Two people can witness the same event: a dog barking, a sudden rainstorm, a piece of music, and have completely different reactions. One person might find the dog's bark frightening, while another finds it playful. One person might be annoyed by the rain, while another finds it refreshing. The external event is the same, but the internal experience is vastly different. Why? Because each person is projecting their own interpretations, their own meanings, onto the event. Look at a familiar object, a chair, a table, a pen. Look at it as if you've never seen it before. Try to strip away all your preconceived notions about it, all the labels you automatically attach to it. What do you see? Just shapes, colors, textures? The idea of chair or table is a mental construct, a useful one, but a construct nonetheless. We constantly label things: good, bad, right, wrong, beautiful, ugly. These labels are not inherent in the things themselves. They are judgments imposed by our minds. Think about a day you labeled as bad. Was it inherently bad, or was it simply a series of events that you reacted to negatively? The events themselves were neutral. Your interpretation made them bad. And it goes even deeper. We don't just label individual events. We create entire narratives about ourselves, about others, about life itself. I'm a failure. I'm successful. He's a bad person. She's a good person. Life is unfair. Life is a gift. These are all stories we tell ourselves, and we often believe these stories as if they were absolute truths. But they're not. They're interpretations, perspectives, often based on limited information and biased perceptions. Try this. Write down a story you tell yourself regularly, a belief you hold strongly about yourself or your life. Now examine it critically. Is it absolutely true? Could there be another way of interpreting the same events? Is this story helpful, or is it limiting you in some way? The Buddha said, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." This isn't some magical thinking. It's a profound observation about the power of our minds to shape our experience. It's not about denying the external world. It's about understanding how our internal world colors our perception of it. So, Maya isn't about denying reality. It's about unveiling the layers of interpretation, the filters of perception, that stand between us and a more direct, unclouded experience of reality. It is not about everything being an illusion. It is about recognizing that the sense world is not as it seems. It's about becoming the magician of your own reality, recognizing the illusions you create, and, in doing so, gaining the freedom to see things more clearly, more truthfully. Life isn't a movie you're passively watching. It's an opportunity to awaken, to see through the veils of Maya, and perceive the underlying reality, the interconnectedness, the impermanence, the emptiness. It isn't to say that our reality is not real, rather to see that we are often perceiving reality through a clouded lens. Part 4. The Two Truths. Navigating Reality in Buddhism. We've explored the shifting sands of self, Anatta, the profound emptiness underlying all phenomena, Śūnyatā, and the way our minds actively construct our experience, Maya. Now, the crucial question: how do we integrate these seemingly abstract concepts into a practical, lived understanding? How do we navigate this complex view of reality, not just intellectually, but in the everyday moments of our lives? Buddhism provides a powerful framework called the Two Truths, which helps reconcile these perspectives, offering a map for navigating the apparent paradoxes. Imagine you're watching a movie. You know, on an intellectual level, that the characters, the settings, the events unfolding on the screen aren't real in the same way that your physical surroundings are. They're projections of light and sound, carefully crafted illusions. Yet despite this knowledge, you can still become deeply emotionally involved in the story. You might feel joy at the protagonist's success, sorrow at their losses, fear during moments of suspense. You're simultaneously aware of two levels of reality: the conventional reality of the narrative, the characters, their relationships, the unfolding plot, and the ultimate reality that it's all just a carefully constructed representation, a play of light and shadow. Buddhism makes a similar but far more profound distinction. It articulates two levels of truth, two ways of understanding reality. First, there's conventional truth, samvriti satya. This is the reality we experience in our ordinary, everyday lives. It's the world of seemingly separate objects, distinct individuals, and fixed identities. It's the level at which we use language, make distinctions, navigate our social interactions, and generally make sense of the world around us. It's the realm where we talk about I, you, tree, car, good, bad, success, failure, and countless other concepts. This conventional level of truth is not dismissed as false or irrelevant. It's simply recognized as relative, as dependent on our perceptions, our conceptual frameworks, and our cultural conditioning. It's the world of Maya, the world as it appears to be, shaped by our mental projections. Then, there's ultimate truth, Paramartha Satya. This is reality as it truly is, beneath the surface appearances, beyond our conceptual constructs and mental projections. It's the realm of radical impermanence, profound interdependence, and the fundamental emptiness, Śūnyatā, of all phenomena. It's the understanding that nothing exists independently, in isolation, that everything is in constant flux, arising and passing away, and that there is no fixed, permanent, separate self, Anatta. Ultimate truth isn't a denial of conventional truth. It's a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of it. It's seeing through the apparent solidity, separateness, and permanence of things to the underlying reality of interconnectedness, impermanence, and emptiness. It's seeing the wave and recognizing that it's ultimately inseparable from the ocean. The crucial point, the heart of this teaching, is that both truths are necessary for a complete and balanced understanding. We cannot function effectively in the world without acknowledging and operating within conventional truth. We need to navigate traffic, pay our bills, communicate with others, plan for the future, and all of this requires engaging with the world of relative distinctions. But without an understanding of ultimate truth, we remain trapped in a cycle of attachment, aversion, and suffering, constantly reacting to illusions as if they were solid, permanent, and inherently real. We chase after fleeting pleasures and run from inevitable pains, failing to see the deeper reality of impermanence. The Buddha, in his teachings, emphasized avoiding extremes. He said, "Monks, these two extremes should not be followed." What two? Attachment to sensual pleasures and attachment to self-mortification. Avoiding both extremes, the Tathagata, the Buddha, has realized the middle path. The middle path, in the context of the two truths, is about skillfully navigating between these two levels of reality, recognizing the validity and necessity of both without clinging rigidly to either. Understanding Maya, as discussed in Part 3, helps us see the constructed, interpretive nature of our conventional reality, preventing us from taking it as absolutely real. Understanding Śūnyatā and Anatta from Part 2 points us towards ultimate truth, revealing the deeper reality beneath the surface appearances. The two truths framework, therefore, is not a philosophical abstraction. It's a practical tool for living with greater wisdom, compassion, and freedom. It's about seeing the movie as a movie, while still appreciating its artistry, its emotional power, and the lessons it might offer. It is about engaging with the world skillfully and compassionately, while remembering its changing and impermanent nature. Part 5. Living with Clarity, the Benefits of Understanding. We've journeyed through some profound territory, the ever-shifting nature of self, Anatta, the fundamental emptiness of all phenomena, Śūnyatā, the way our minds construct our experience, Maya, and the framework of the two truths for navigating these realities. Now, let's bring it all back to the practical, the everyday. What are the benefits of understanding these concepts? How does this shift in perspective actually change the way we live? The most immediate benefit is a reduction in suffering. When we understand that everything is impermanent, that nothing lasts forever, we're less likely to cling desperately to things, people, or outcomes. We develop a greater sense of acceptance, of allowing things to arise and pass away without resistance. This doesn't mean we become passive or indifferent. It means we engage with life from a place of greater equanimity, less tossed around by the winds of change. Understanding interconnectedness, the realization that we are not separate, isolated entities, naturally leads to increased compassion. When we see through the illusion of a separate self, we begin to feel a deeper connection to others, to all living beings. Empathy becomes more natural, more spontaneous. We recognize that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for the entire web of life. This understanding also leads to greater freedom. When we're no longer trapped by our illusions, by our limiting beliefs, by our attachment to fixed ideas about ourselves and the world, we experience a profound sense of liberation. We're free to respond to life with greater flexibility, creativity, and joy. We're no longer bound by the stories we tell ourselves, the labels we impose on ourselves and others. So how do we cultivate this understanding? How do we move from intellectual concepts to lived experience? There are several practical applications, all rooted in the core teachings of Buddhism. Mindfulness. This is the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It's about observing our thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they arise and pass away without getting caught up in them. Mindfulness helps us see the impermanent nature of our experience directly. Meditation. This is a practice of calming the mind, developing concentration, and cultivating insight. There are many different forms of meditation, but they all share the common goal of training the mind to be more present, more focused, and more aware. Ethical conduct. Living with kindness, compassion, honesty, and integrity. These aren't just abstract moral principles. They're practical ways of cultivating inner peace and reducing suffering, both for ourselves and for others. This isn't a quick fix or a magic bullet. It's a gradual process, a path of unfolding understanding. Start by questioning your assumptions, the stories you tell yourself. Observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Practice mindfulness, even for a few minutes each day. Cultivate kindness and compassion in your interactions with others. Buddhism doesn't deny reality, it illuminates it. By understanding Śūnyatā, Maya, and the two truths, we can begin to see through the veils of illusion and live with greater wisdom, compassion, and freedom. We can move from a life of reactivity to a life of responsiveness, from a life of clinging to a life of flow. The Buddha's final words, as recorded in the scriptures, offer a powerful reminder. Do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. This is an invitation to explore, to question, to discover the truth for yourself, not through blind faith, but through direct experience. It's an invitation to awaken,